just how much can this new Prime Minister blame on his Tory predecessors?
What if you woke up to find that the farm your family has loved and cared for generations is in danger? The farm is a part of your history, your way of life, and your deepest sense of self. Many British farmers now have to face this sad truth because of Keir Starmer's policies, which include a harsh estate tax that could destroy the country's farming history. Farms that have stood as the heart of Britain's food supply and as representations of community resilience and self-reliance are now caught in the crossfire of taxation, a move that reduces a deeply personal legacy into an impersonal financial target. This isn't just another tax increase. It's a substantial threat to an entire way of life that has shaped British identity and rural culture for centuries. The warning signs are clear. While Starmer's government defends the inheritance tax as a necessary policy, countless farmers see it as a direct attack on their heritage, leaving families in rural Britain with few options but to contemplate what once seemed unimaginable, losing the farms that are both their homes and livelihoods. For generations, British farmers have maintained these lands under conditions of hard work and sacrifice, only to find themselves facing policies that could wipe away their legacies, leaving them scrambling to preserve a life they have always known. Even Elon Musk recently weighed in on the matter, challenging Starmer's government to reconsider the tax, suggesting they back off and acknowledge the contribution farmers make to society by putting food on tables nationwide. His remarks were not only a rallying cry, but also a sobering reminder of the disconnect between the policymakers and the people they affect. Surprisingly, Musk's call resonated deeply with the British public, highlighting the stark contrast between the government's stance and the support British farmers now find in unexpected places. This is not just a slight policy shift. Starmer's inheritance tax targets farms valued over £1 million.
£2 million reduction in the waiting lists by the scheme that we've got to work 24/7.
A figure that may sound significant, but in the context of farming is often the baseline cost of essential land and equipment. In reality, this value doesn't signify wealth. In fact, for these families, £1 million simply represents the minimum required to sustain a farm, from buying the land to maintaining the machinery that enables them to meet the demand for British produce. There's no luxury involved here, only the costs inherent to the land and labour that define rural life. Far from sprawling estates, these are modest family farms, often built on a few acres of land, with only essential buildings to house livestock or store produce. Now, as farmers gear up to protect their livelihoods, they understand what's at stake and are preparing to challenge a policy that could rob them of their heritage. Starmer's inheritance tax isn't just an economic measure, it's an assault on family-run farms that have sustained communities for hundreds of years. With new taxation aimed at farms worth over £1 million.
But they still have to find another £17 billion for this year alone by the budget at the end of October.
The policy jeopardises not only individual farms, but the very structure of British agriculture, leaving those who rely on it facing potential ruin. The reality of farming economics is vastly different from public perceptions. While £1 million valuation may look substantial, it's often a misleading figure when it comes to farming. As Ollie Harrison, a farmer who has publicly criticised the tax, points out, "I can't even afford to die." His words reflect the harsh truth that while farms may hold significant paper value due to the price of land, they are not liquid assets, and farmers don't possess the kind of cash reserves needed to pay such hefty taxes. James Robinson, another farmer from Cumbria, echoes this sentiment, explaining that while his farm may be valued at over £1 million, it's not money that can simply be accessed to settle a tax bill. What appears as wealth on paper does not translate to wealth in hand, leaving farmers trapped in a cycle of high value but low liquidity. This predicament underscores a significant truth. Family farms are invaluable, but their worth isn't defined by readily accessible funds. The real value lies in the heritage and the centuries of hard work invested, something that goes beyond mere financial terms. For families who have cultivated this land for generations, the notion that their farms could be sold off to meet tax demands is an unimaginable betrayal. Emma Gray, a shepherdess from Scotland, describes this policy as a land grab by the government. She warns that many families will struggle to pass their farms on to future generations because of the financial burden the tax creates, with pressures to pay off debts or distribute inheritances among family members. Selling off parts of the land could soon become the only way to cover tax liabilities. Coupled with a 20% inheritance tax rate and fewer relief options, the policy creates an impossible situation for these families, forcing them to choose between family legacy and financial survival. Consider Tom, whose family has farmed for more than 350 years. For him, the inheritance tax bill could reach an overwhelming £700,000, a burden no small farm can sustain. Farming several hundred acres doesn't yield the kind of financial gain some imagine. Instead, it's a life defined by modest means, hard work, and often financial strain. Farms aren't giant profit machines, but rather enduring symbols of tradition and resilience. They are integral to the British food supply and the broader rural economy. Starmer's tax proposal risks dismantling this rural life and replacing it with corporate interests, foreign ownership, and large-scale agricultural production that prioritizes profit over community welfare. Ultimately, the question arises, who stands to gain from this tax?
Some areas underspends, in others there'll be tax receipts that might be above expectations or not.
Certainly not the farmers, who are now being squeezed out of their own lands. Instead, multinational corporations and foreign investors are positioning themselves to purchase valuable farmland if family farms fail to meet tax requirements. Starmer's proposal could set the stage for corporate control over British farmland, erasing centuries of agricultural heritage in the process. Once transferred to corporate hands, these lands will no longer sustain local communities, but serve as assets for high-stakes investors. Rural Britain risks losing not only its farms, but its culture and way of life, reduced to mere commodities on a corporate balance sheet. This shift threatens more than food production, though that alone should be cause for alarm. These lands hold deep cultural and historical significance. They embody generations of commitment, care, and respect for the natural landscape. While Starmer defends his policy by claiming it will only impact wealthy farmers, the truth is evident to those whose livelihoods are bound to the land. Their farms are not just financial assets, but homes and symbols of family history. Farmers view this inheritance tax as a betrayal, feeling that a tax initially framed as a way to level the playing field could instead destroy their lives and livelihoods. The inheritance tax is likely to result in farmland being sold to entities that have no stake in local communities or agricultural traditions. Emma Gray points out that corporate interests could easily acquire this land to meet carbon offset quotas or for other commercial purposes. The concept of British farms owned and operated by local families may soon be replaced by industrialised farming ventures, fundamentally reshaping the rural landscape in a way that disregards centuries of stewardship. What happens when these family farms vanish? Britain would lose more than just food sources. It would lose a cornerstone of its cultural identity. Farming isn't simply about producing food. It's about fostering rural communities, preserving knowledge, and maintaining traditions that urban dwellers may not fully understand. The farmer's way of life has always been tied to the land, built on values that can't be measured by a balance sheet. The tension is mounting across rural Britain, and farmers feel abandoned by policymakers who seem out of touch with rural realities. The public, too, is starting to see the cracks in this policy, questioning why British politicians are not defending one of the nation's essential industries. Instead of taxing it to extinction, British agriculture deserves robust support that acknowledges its contribution to national life and security. As farmers look ahead, they are prepared to stand up for their land, and a significant protest could be on the horizon. From the hills of Cumbria to the fields of East Anglia, the farming community is rallying not just for tax relief, but for the survival of their entire way of life. This isn't a minor dispute, it's a matter of survival. People in the countryside are fed up with policies that seem to ignore the fundamental realities of farming. This issue goes beyond farming. It touches on food security, the survival of rural communities, and the preservation of British heritage. Every farm lost is a piece of Britain gone forever. Starmer's plan may be portrayed as a wealth tax, but in reality, it's an assault on the farming community and rural culture. The inheritance tax threshold fails to reflect the realities of farming. potentially unraveling the rural fabric of Britain in pursuit of short-term financial gain. Outrage is growing as farmers express their dismay at feeling forsaken by their government. Without a shift in policy, rural Britain faces an uncertain future. Now, more than ever, British farmers need public support to safeguard what may otherwise be lost. If policymakers continue down this path, the regret will come too late. British farmers are known for their resilience, but even resilience has its limits. Without the support of their government, an entire way of life hangs in the balance. It's time for a serious rethink of policies that threaten to dismantle a vital part of British life, one that has sustained both people and land for generations. As discussions around Starmer's inheritance tax continue, British farmers remain committed to fighting for what they believe is an irreplaceable cause. Once these farms are gone, they're gone for good, and the true cost of that loss will extend far beyond mere pounds and pence.